December 26, 1900, Boxing Day. The steamship Hesperus approaches the Flannan Isles, a remote cluster of rocky islands in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, about 20 miles west of the Isle of Lewis. The ship's captain, Jim Harvey, notices something wrong immediately. The lighthouse on Eilean Muir, the largest of the Flannan Isles, is dark, completely dark. This is a critical navigation light for ships travelling the treacherous waters around Scotland's western coast, and it hasn't been lit for several days. Ships have been reporting the light's absence, and the Northern Lighthouse Board has sent the Hesperus to investigate. Captain Harvey sounds the ship's horn repeatedly. No response. He fires a flare into the sky. Nothing. The island appears completely deserted. A relief keeper named Joseph Moore volunteers to go ashore in a small boat. The sea is rough, making the landing dangerous, but Moore is experienced and determined. He reaches the concrete landing platform and climbs the steep stairs toward the lighthouse. Everything seems normal at first. The gates are closed. The exterior appears fine. But as he approaches the entrance, an overwhelming sense of wrongness settles over him. The main door is unlocked but closed. He calls out, "Silence." He steps inside. The lighthouse is empty. The clocks have stopped. The beds are unmade. The kitchen table is set for a meal that was never eaten. And the three lighthouse keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur, have vanished without a trace. Welcome to the Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery, one of the most enduring and inexplicable disappearances in maritime history. Over the next 10 minutes, we're going to explore what Joseph Moore found that day, the strange clues left behind, the official investigation that raised more questions than it answered, and the theories that have tried and failed to explain how three experienced men could vanish from a locked lighthouse on a remote island with no boats, no bodies, and no rational explanation. Let's set the scene properly, because the location is crucial to understanding why this mystery is so disturbing. The Flannan Isles are not a pleasant place. They're a group of rocky islands in one of the most dangerous stretches of water around Scotland. The largest island, Eilean Muir, is less than 40 acres of barren rock, grass, and cliffs. It's uninhabited, except for the lighthouse keepers who rotate in and out. The lighthouse itself was relatively new in 1900, having been built just the year before, to help guide ships through these treacherous waters. 3 keepers were always assigned to the light, 2 on duty, while 1 remained on shore leave on the Isle of Lewis. This rotation system meant keepers worked in isolation for weeks at a time, with only each other for company. The 3 men who vanished were all experienced lighthouse keepers. James Ducat was the principal keeper, 43 years old, with years of experience at various lighthouses. He was described as a steady, reliable man who took his responsibilities seriously. Thomas Marshall was the second assistant, 28 years old, also experienced and known for being careful and methodical. Donald MacArthur was the occasional keeper, filling in for the regular third keeper who was on leave. MacArthur was older, in his 40s, and was known to be somewhat temperamental, but thoroughly professional. These were not reckless men. They understood the sea, they understood their duties, and they knew the dangers of their isolated post. The last confirmed contact with the 3 keepers was on December 15, 1900, when a passing ship reported seeing the Flannan Isles light burning properly. After that date, multiple ships traveling through the area reported that the light was out of serious concern that prompted the Northern Lighthouse Board to dispatch the Hesperus to investigate. But bad weather delayed the ship's arrival, and it wasn't until December 26 that Joseph Moore finally stepped foot on the island to discover the keepers were gone. What Moore found that day has been documented in official reports, and the details are unsettling. The lighthouse itself was in order, the lamp was ready to be lit. The oil reservoirs were full. Everything was as it should be for normal operation. But in the keepers' living quarters, things were strange. The kitchen clock had stopped. 2 of the 3 oilskin coats, heavy waterproof coats the keepers would wear in bad weather, were missing from their hooks. The 3rd coat remained. This detail would become crucial in later theories. One of the beds was unmade, suggesting someone had gotten up suddenly. An overturned chair lay on the floor near the kitchen table. But the most disturbing clues were found outside, at the western landing, not the main landing where Moore had arrived, but a secondary platform on the more exposed side of the island. There was significant damage. An iron railing was bent and twisted. A wooden box that weighed over a ton had been ripped from its concrete mounts and tossed aside. A large rock platform 70 feet above sea level showed signs of massive wave impact. with debris and damage that suggested the sea had reached heights that should have been impossible. And on the cliff paths, there were signs that something violent had happened, though what, exactly, no one could determine. Joseph Moore was shaken by what he found. He returned to the Hesperus and reported the disappearance. Captain Harvey and additional crew members went ashore to conduct a more thorough search. They scoured the entire island, all 40 acres of it. They checked every building, every path, every cliff edge. They found nothing. No bodies. No signs of struggle beyond the damaged landing area. No indication of where 3 grown men could have gone on an island barely half a mile across, with no boats and no means of escape. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. The official investigation was led by Superintendent Robert Muirhead of the Northern Lighthouse Board. He arrived on December 29th and conducted an exhaustive examination of the lighthouse and surrounding area. His official report, filed in January 1901, documented the physical evidence, but struggled to provide a conclusive explanation. Muirhead's theory, based on the evidence, was that the 3 men had been swept away by a massive wave while investigating damage at the western landing. But even he acknowledged this theory had significant problems. Here's what Muirhead proposed. On December 15th, or shortly after, a severe storm hit the Flannan Isles. The keepers noticed damage to equipment at the western landing, perhaps the bent railing or displaced box. James Duquette and Thomas Marshall went down to investigate and secure the landing, wearing their oilskin coats because of the rough weather. Donald MacArthur stayed at the lighthouse, as protocol required at least 1 keeper to remain with the light at all times. While Duquette and Marshall were at the landing, a massive freak wave, possibly a rogue wave reaching heights of 70 to 100 feet, swept both men into the sea. MacArthur, seeing his colleagues in danger, ran from the lighthouse without his coat to try to help them. He too was swept away by another wave. All 3 men drowned, their bodies carried out to sea and never recovered. This theory seems plausible at first. The damaged landing certainly suggested massive wave action. Rogue waves are real phenomena and can reach incredible heights in the right conditions. The missing coats partially support the idea that 2 men went out in foul weather while 1 did not, and the remote, violent nature of the location makes death by drowning tragically possible. But there are significant problems with this explanation. First, lighthouse keepers were trained never to go near exposed landings during severe storms. These men were experienced professionals who understood the danger of heavy seas. Would they really risk their lives to investigate minor damage that could wait until calmer weather? Second, MacArthur supposedly ran out without his coat, but the weather was described as cold and stormy. Would an experienced keeper really abandon the lighthouse and run toward danger without even grabbing his coat? Third, all 3 men disappearing to the same wave or sequence of waves requires extraordinary bad luck and poor decision-making from multiple experienced professionals simultaneously. And there are other troubling details that don't fit the official theory. The lighthouse log, which keepers were required to maintain meticulously, was examined by investigators. According to some accounts, the final entries described storms of unusual severity and mentioned disturbing observations. One version of the story claims the log described Marshall and MacArthur acting strangely, with Duquette noting that MacArthur had been crying and that Marshall, normally calm, seemed disturbed and was praying. The final entry allegedly described the storm subsiding and ending with the words, "God is over all." However, this dramatic log entry has been disputed. Some researchers claim these details were embellishments added to newspaper accounts shortly after the disappearance and don't appear in the official lighthouse records. The actual log may have been far more mundane, simply documenting weather conditions and routine duties, with no indication of anything unusual. The truth about what the log actually said has been obscured by decades of retellings and dramatization. What is documented and verifiable is Joseph Moore's testimony. He gave multiple interviews about his discovery, and his accounts remained consistent. He described the feeling of dread that overtook him as he approached the silent lighthouse, the eerie stillness of the living quarters, and the overturned chair that suggested someone had stood up suddenly. He mentioned that when he first called out, the echo of his own voice in the empty lighthouse was one of the most unsettling experiences of his life. Moore later said he had nightmares about the empty lighthouse for years after. Theories about what happened to the 3 keepers have ranged from the plausible to the absurd. Let's examine the main explanations. Theory 1. Freak wave. This is the official explanation. A massive rogue wave, or series of waves, swept all three men to their deaths. Problems requires all three to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, contradicts their training and experience, and doesn't explain why MacArthur would leave without his coat. Theory 2. Accident and attempted rescue. One keeper had an accident near the landing, fell, had a medical emergency, etc. The second went to help, and the third also went to assist, resulting in all three somehow being swept away or falling to their deaths. Problems, similar issues to Theory 1, and doesn't explain the lack of any distress signals or emergency procedures being followed. Theory 3. Murder and suicide. 1. Keeper murdered the other, 2 possibly during a psychological breakdown, and then jumped off the cliffs or somehow disposed of the bodies before killing himself. His body was then washed away, leaving no evidence. Problems. No evidence of violence in the living quarters. All three men were experienced and professional with no known conflicts, and it would be extremely difficult for one man to kill 2 others and dispose of bodies on a small island. Theory 4. Abduction or kidnapping. Pirates, smugglers, or enemy agents came to the island and kidnapped or killed the keepers. Problems. No boats were reported near the island. The lighthouse lamp would have been a beacon alerting anyone approaching. The island's isolation makes this extremely unlikely, and there's no motive. Lighthouse keepers had nothing worth stealing. Theory 5. Supernatural causes. The keepers encountered something paranormal, were taken by sea spirits, or experienced some other supernatural event. This theory has no evidence but persists in folklore and local legend. The Flannan Isles had been considered eerie even before the lighthouse was built, with local superstitions warning against visiting them. Theory 6. They abandoned their post. The 3 men staged their own disappearances and fled the island somehow, perhaps due to psychological strain or personal reasons. Problems. No boats, no means of escape, no motive, and all 3 men had families and careers they would be abandoning. This theory makes the least sense of all. The most likely explanation remains some variation of the official theory: death by drowning due to freak weather conditions and unfortunate decision-making. But the exact sequence of events will probably never be known. The sea doesn't give up, it's dead easily, especially in those waters. Without bodies, without witnesses, without a clear timeline, the Flannan Isles mystery remains unsolved. The disappearance had a profound impact on lighthouse keeping in Scotland. The Northern Lighthouse Board revised safety protocols, reinforced exposed landing areas at remote lighthouses, and increased the frequency of relief visits to ensure keepers' welfare. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse continued operating with new keepers, though many reported feeling uneasy there, particularly during storms. Some claimed to hear voices calling from the cliffs or see figures near the western landing. These reports were likely the result of isolation, knowledge of the tragedy, and the inherently eerie nature of the location, but they became part of the lighthouse's dark legend. The lighthouse was eventually automated in 1971 and no longer requires resident keepers. It stands on Eilean Mara to this day, its light still guiding ships through dangerous waters. But the island remains haunting, a windswept rock where 3 men vanished into mystery over 120 years ago. Visitors occasionally make the difficult journey to the Flannan Isles, walking the same paths the keepers walked, standing at the western landing where massive waves once struck with enough force to bend iron and move tons of stone, and trying to imagine what those final moments must have been like. The Flannan Isles mystery has inspired poems, songs, books, and films. Perhaps the most famous is Wilfred Wilson Gibson's 1912 poem, Flannan Isle, which dramatizes Joseph Moore's discovery and captures the eerie atmosphere of that day. The poem ends with Moore and his companions fleeing the lighthouse in terror, though in reality Moore was shaken but professional. The mystery has also been referenced in Doctor Who, and in 2018, a film called The Vanishing offered a fictionalized psychological thriller interpretation of events. What makes this mystery so enduring is its perfect storm of elements: experienced men who should have known better, an isolated location with no escape routes, physical evidence that suggests violence but no clear explanation, and a complete absence of bodies or definitive answers. It's a locked-room mystery set on a locked island, with no solution that fully satisfies all the evidence. Every theory has holes. Every explanation requires assumptions or unlikely coincidences. Perhaps that's why the Flannan Isles Lighthouse mystery continues to fascinate us over a century later. We need answers. We need explanations. We need to believe that trained professionals don't just vanish without a trace, leaving behind only an overturned chair and a stopped clock. But sometimes, rarely, terrifyingly, people do disappear completely. And when they do, we're left with nothing but questions and the uncomfortable knowledge that some mysteries may never be solved. The families of James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur never got closure. They never recovered bodies to bury. They never learned exactly what happened in those final moments. They were left with grief and uncertainty, the worst combination. The men themselves are remembered on memorials to lost lighthouse keepers, their names carved in stone as a reminder of the dangers these isolated workers faced in service of keeping others safe. So what really happened on Ellen Mara between December 15th and December 26, 1900? The honest answer is we don't know. We'll probably never know. The sea keeps its secrets, and the Flannan Isles are not giving up this one. All we have are the facts. 3 men vanished, leaving behind an empty lighthouse, a stopped clock, an overturned chair, and a mystery that has outlasted everyone who was alive when it happened. Thanks for watching this deep dive into one of maritime history's most enduring mysteries. The Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers deserve to be remembered, not just for the mystery of their disappearance, but for the service they provided and the families they left behind. If you found this story compelling, hit that like button and subscribe for more unsolved mysteries and historical enigmas. And remember, some questions don't have answers. No matter how hard we look, retry.